2 words, Revo Fitness. Here's a few more. Simple, 24/7, reformer Pilates, body scanners, massage chairs, squat racks, free weights, pin and plate loaded equipment, no lock-in contracts, no bullshit. All of that and more from just $9.69 a week. That's surprisingly affordable. Join now at Revo Fitness Windsor Gardens or download the Revo Fitness app. RevoFitness.com.au or find the Revo Fitness app in the App Store.
We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was produced, the Gadigal People of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. This episode contains discussion of suicide. If this raises any issues for you, support is available through the links and phone numbers in the show notes.
It's 2022 and Julie Goodwin's phone is ringing. It's the producer of MasterChef, inviting Julie to come back for the fans and favourites season. 13 years after winning the first Australian season, Julie is utterly terrified at the thought of returning to where it all began.
You are Australia's first MasterChef.
This show completely changed her life. Her win catapulted her into the spotlight. And with it came book deals, a cooking school, radio show, and TV hosting gigs. But in 2020, everything came to a grinding halt. Julie couldn't cope with the pressure any longer and didn't want to be here anymore. Her despair reached crisis point, resulting in a 5-week stay in a mental health facility. 2 years on, she's in a much better place. Despite being terrified, she says yes to the opportunity, a far cry from the woman who couldn't step into a kitchen just a couple of years prior. Julie is back in the pressure cooker. I'm Ant Middleton, and this is Headgame. Today, Julie Goodwin on the conversation that kept her alive. Julie, we first met on Dancing with the Stars.
We are dancing buddies, aren't we?
We are dancing buddies. And we got on really well. I really enjoyed your journey. I really enjoyed your presence, your aura, your energy. Have you always been like that?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I've always, I don't know. I just love new experiences and getting to sort of chuck myself into something completely different. And always the best part of those things is the people that you meet, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
what you get to do with the people that you meet. And you know, I really loved seeing you sort of progress through that competition, but your acknowledgement, because obviously you're such a sort of physical sort of beast. Specimen. Your acknowledgement of the dancers and how fit they are and what a different kind of discipline it is, and that you can be really at the top of your game in one area and still have no idea about other things and, you know, things you're unfamiliar with. It was so interesting.
Yeah, I sort of swapped out my army boots for dancing shoes, and you swapped out your spatulas and pans for dancing shoes. Yep. Let's go right back before we get into the nitty gritty of MasterChef and your life and, you know, where you are today. Let's go back to where it all started. As a youngster growing up, how did life look for you?
I grew up in the suburbs of Sydney, blue-collar family, sort of fairly normal, I would say. You know, mum and dad both had a working ethic. I was raised by my stepdad, who is still my dad. Like, mum and dad have been married for coming on 50 years now. And so my biological father left when I was very young. And
what age?
I was 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember your biological father?
I do.
You do?
I have. It was like one of my earliest memories.
What is your earliest memory?
The first thing I can attribute to that time in my life was the memory where he had left. Mum was pregnant when he left, and he popped back to collect some of his things. And I was so excited to see him because I hadn't seen him for ages. You know, little kids get excited. And Mum said I must have been so excited I needed to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, he'd gone again. And and I didn't see him again then till I was, coming up for 14, 15 years old.
Wow. So that memory was a positive one in the excitement, but ultimately a super negative one, because when you came back, he'd obviously popped in, grabbed his stuff and left.
Yeah, I don't think he wanted to do the goodbye. I don't think he wanted to tell me that it was goodbye.
And for that to be one of your first memories as well, it's obviously implanted as it does, right? As it does.
As it does, all that
in your
stuff.
head.
Yep.
How did that affect you sort of moving forward with your, let's say, your new father, your stepfather and your mum? Was there any sort of hurdles there where there was resentment or anything like that? Or were you, at that age, I suppose you're quite mouldable, aren't you?
Totally. And when my stepdad, as he's known, as he is,
no, I understand.
Came on the scene, I just loved him and he loved us. And so he just stepped into that role and has maintained that role. He took me to band practice and he loved my mum and we're a family, So I adore him and he adores us. So, I don't feel like I missed out on having a father figure in my life because they got married when I was 6.
Gotcha.
So I had this beautiful male role model in my life. But now what I've just been unpacking through all this sort of psychological journey I've been on, for want of a better word, is that early leaving, it does shape how you interact
100%.
with the world. And so my persona, and when you ask if I've always been like that, I guess what I've learned is that always trying to be really shiny, do really well at school, make everybody happy, never let anybody down, all of that really comes from a terror of being left.
Wow. And that makes complete sense, because when that gets snatched away from you, I suppose it sort of lives with you. It's like, what did I do wrong, or how could I do things better to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And I didn't know until recently how much that shapes you, because I've always thought, And
when you say recently, where recently as in the last couple of years, or recently as in your adulthood?
Past 4 years.
Past 4 years?
Yep.
Oh, wow. When did that sort of trigger in? When did that sort of click in?
Well, it clicked in when I started having pretty intensive therapy for a complete mental breakdown. So that's all been unpacked, all that and a bunch of other stuff that happened. And it's traumas that happen in childhood that aren't acknowledged or resolved. They don't go away.
They're just buried, right? They're
they
buried
simmer
and they
away.
resurface.
They do.
Yeah.
And you can paper over the cracks all your life, but it'll find a way out. And so that was all part of the cumulative process towards completely falling apart.
Did it affect your school? Were you a good kid? Were you a cheeky kid? Were you a naughty kid? What? I
was super good.
You were super good
super
because
good.
of that.
Yep.
Yep.
I believe that sort of had an impact on it. It's a bit hard to swallow, It's like, I worked really hard at school. I did well at school. I was a real goody two-shoes. I would have been a pain in the ass. I was the school captain at Hornsby Girls High School. Like achieving was really important to me. And it upset me to find out that might be because I was frightened of being abandoned. And that's how I learned that's how you make people happy with you. And if you make people happy with you, they stick around. So I was like, well, hang on a minute. If I'm just a set of reactions, who am I? So you've got to sort of tease out what's your natural state and what came about because of what happened to you and all that sort of stuff. So it's all a bit of a tangled ball of wool.
Do you come from a big family, or are you an only child?
Oh, no. So I have a little sister. She was the one who was in the oven back when my father left. And for a while I had a couple of step siblings. But I was pretty energetic and active, and I ran around a lot, and I loved sport, hyper competitive, but my schooling was more geared towards academic and musical. So that's sort of where I leaned into study and music, choir and band and all those hyper cool things.
So you were a proper goody two-shoes. If you could fit the persona of a goody two-shoes, it's school, it's band, it's choir.
Yeah.
It's in love that. Absolutely
massive
dag. Going into sort of your later education, was there any sort of career that really, really excited you? And I'm obviously going to get into cooking, but before that, did you have a good idea of what you wanted to do, and it sounds like you were very settled and very structured in your life. Was there a career path that you decided to take before obviously you got whisked away onto MasterChef?
Oh, yeah. When I was at high school, I wanted to be, I was tossing up between criminal law and journalism. So those were the directions I wanted to head in. Those were both, you needed like good marks and all that sort of thing to do those things. In year 11, I had a bit of a thing happen. I had a memory resurface, a suppressed memory from childhood, which was a trauma, and that I didn't really know that set me off the rails until I sat down to write my life was autobiography, and then the timeline just was there in front of me.
And was that recently that you wrote your book?
Last year,
because
it was released.
Exactly the same as myself. When I started writing my memoir, you sort of go back, and because you just go back and you sort of break down those memories and you go really into the finer detail of it, you start to learn so much about yourself. You start to learn so much about what happened. You start to really understand what were the triggers for here, the things that you never knew that you would do unless you really dig in.
It's extraordinary.
And write a memoir. Right?
It's extraordinary, isn't it? And I'd actually recommend it to anyone, even if you just write your life out chronologically, if it's not for publication. The learning and the understanding that came from that process was quite mind-blowing. I actually needed a bit of therapeutic help through the process because it was really hard. And I remember I sat down to write. I'm not sure at what point the wheels fell off these ambitions, but as I'm writing it, I thought, well, look, when it happened, the wheels fell off just after I had this memory resurface, and all sorts of stuff started to go wrong after that, That's when everything changed. I was a skinny little kid. That's when I started to put on weight and eat in an unhealthy way. That's all sorts of stuff went wrong.
From this memory?
Now I know it's from that. I didn't know it then because I shoved it straight back down. I didn't want it.
Like we do.
But it's like trying to unring a bell, And so from going to wanting to be a criminal lawyer to a journalist to I just kind of gave up a little bit. And so I knew I wasn't going to get the marks I wanted. So then I thought, well, I'll be a teacher, which was a lower entry score into university. And then I went to university. I only lasted 18 months at university. I turned into a ghost.
And do you think that memory that you had in year 11, is that your exams? That's quite a critical year. How old are you at that stage?
Yeah, I was 16 when the memory came back. I had completely suppressed it, and then I remembered it, and it was not a welcome memory, and there wasn't a big light bulb moment. It was almost like it was like a book on a bookshelf that I hadn't looked at for a really long time. It had always been there, but on this one particular day, I just took the book out and looked at it and went, oh, that's right. There's this book on my bookshelf. And as a 16-year-old, I didn't know what to do with it. So I stuck it back on the shelf and I put my back against it and I braced my legs against it and I held it there as hard as I could. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know that book was there. That's as close as I can get to describing what happened.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And that's what we do, especially when we can't face it and it's something that Did you have a support network that you could have spoken to? Or I suppose at 16 you don't really. It's a case of you do, don't you? You shove it away.
It was the 1980s.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the 1980s, and it just wasn't spoken about.
Enough said.
That wasn't spoken about.
Yeah.
And that led to actually in year 12, and see again, this is stuff I hadn't thought about for years until my world fell apart. Nearly 5 years ago now. Hadn't thought about any of this, but that was had an attempt on my own life in year 12.
So the domino effect of was it the domino effect of this memory?
Yep.
And you,
but I didn't know that's why I did that.
No.
I didn't know it until I wrote it all down and went, oh my God, that's why that happened. Oh my God, that's why that happened. I now know that when I went to university, I was severely depressed. I would go whole days without speaking to anybody. I didn't have friends. I went from being, the school captain of my high school and involved in every extracurricular group you could think of, and in this leadership role, to going to university where I would not speak for whole days at a time.
So your world just flipped upside down ultimately.
Completely. And I never knew why until recently. Yeah. So it was a big thing to come to terms with.
And you mentioned just in year 12 there that you wanted to take your life. Was that planned? Or did it sort of escalate into, right, I'm going to plan this or I'm going to do it? Or was it just, right, I'm in this situation, I don't want to be here anymore?
There was so much pressure. And this is why every year when those exam results come out, I reach out to everyone I know who's waiting on them and I say, this is not the rest of your life. This is one moment in your life, and it will only determine what you do next. It will not determine what you do for the rest of your life. So whatever happens, don't worry, because I know the despair I felt and it was the day before I had a trial HSC exam, and I was left on my own in the house to study, and I just decided I could not face that exam the next day. And so that's what I did. And the response then, and again, it was the 1980s. There was no support. It was there was quite a sort of sneering attitude towards kids and their cries for attention. So it was decided, and, with all great love to my parents, their belief was they were doing the best thing for me. It was kind of decided that we would just keep it to ourselves because
the stigma of it getting
because
out.
of the stigma.
Oh, so-and-so's daughter.
They'll take the school captaincy away from you. You'll never get over this. Your reputation will be destroyed.
And that will trickle on into the family as well, right?
Yep.
Oh,
the
so-and-so's
shame.
daughter. Yeah, the shame.
The shame of it. And so, the hospital can't talk about it because they're bound not to, and we decided as a family that we would never speak of it again. And so there was no unpacking of that. There was no psychological support. I'll never forget the social worker who came into the hospital after a few days I'd been in, and she says, well, are you going to do that again? And I said, no. She said, all right then. And she signed me out. That was the extent of the mental health support that was available to me.
2 words, Revo Fitness. Here's a few more. Simple, 24/7, reformer Pilates, body scanners, massage chairs, squat racks, free weights, pin and plate loaded equipment, no lock-in contracts, no bullshit. All of that and more from just $9.69 a week. That's surprisingly affordable. Join now at Revo Fitness Windsor Gardens or download the Revo Fitness app, revofitness.com.au, or find the Revo Fitness app in the App Store.
So after that moment when you decided to take your life, did the dominoes keep on falling thereafter, or did you decide to sort of get your life back on track? How did you manage to do that? Because ultimately you had to do it by yourself.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I didn't really the idea of depression was not a part of our family vernacular. That's actually people feeling sorry for themselves. That's what that was defined as. People who can't pick themselves up by their bootstraps and put a good face on it, and all that sort of all that tough talk, which my parents were raised by people who went through the war and the depression and all that sort of stuff, and it just flows on. And I understand it. I completely understand it. There are eras where, that's what you have to do.
Yeah. Or situations that were lasted so long, i.e. the wars, that you had no choice.
Well, you would know.
Do it. Yeah.
You can't be talking about depression when you're in the middle of a battlefield. No. It's like, let's go. But you also have to leave the battlefield on the battlefield, right? And bring compassion into other areas of your life. So I didn't know that that's what was happening, and I didn't realise that that's what had happened until I wrote down my story and when the light bulbs were going on all over the place. I left uni and I drifted through a few sort of not very important jobs, and I was trying to find my place in the world. I met the boy who I fell in love with and I'm still married to decades and decades later. So I really landed on my feet with the right person, my life partner. And, eventually I found my way into youth work, and that's where I found a real affinity. That's what I loved to do.
Oh, youth work,
Yeah.
helping others ultimately.
Yeah.
And did that give you a great sense of achievement, of purpose?
It can be. I don't know. I think I was always looking for purposeful things to do, where I met my not yet husband was in a St Vincent de Paul youth group. So we used to go out and do dawn patrol in King's Cross and hand out sandwiches at 3 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. So I was always looking for purpose.
Homemade sandwiches?
Oh, yeah, no. We'd pick them up from the Matt Talbot hostel where they were made in bulk and
Judy,
the
come on.
dreadful coffee in urns and stuff. Youth work really gave me a sense of purpose, and I ended up at Frank Baxter Juvenile Detention Centre after I got married and moved up the coast. So I was working up there in detention with those lads, and that was 30 years ago now. And I'm back there now. So
you're back there.
I'm back there, but I've developed a cooking course which I go in and teach the boys how to cook, and we sit down. The cooking is, you wouldn't think you'd hear me say this, but the cooking's actually secondary in this course. So the most important thing is the act of doing that together and then sitting at a table together and having a family meal. So instead of being served food onto their plate, which they eat and go back to their cell, we sit at the table. It's all served family style, so they've got to share, they've got to communicate,
Got to work together.
And
they've got to problem solve.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got to look to left and right and see if everyone's got enough, and they've got to, and there's table rules, family rules, and I'm being the mum, I'm just like, well, don't go, I don't like that. And I say, well, family dinner rules. You don't have to like it. You don't have to finish it, but you have to taste it.
Yeah, exactly.
And, so they're trying new things, and so it's been a beautiful full circle to actually go back into youth work and to be able to bring the cooking along with me.
So cooking, have you always been a sort of a chef? How did the love for cooking, which ultimately changed your career and changed your path in life, when did that sort of become serious? When did you know that you were this chef extraordinaire?
Well, I still don't know about that, but I think Matt Preston described it really well once during MasterChef. He said the greatest cuisines of the world come from that country's poverty. So, you think about pate in France. Well, that's liver. I mean, you don't figure out that tastes good unless you're really hungry. I'm sorry.
Unless you're using every
single thing,
of,
because there's nothing, you can't afford to waste anything.
Yeah.
That's how I started cooking. So I didn't cook a lot growing up because I'm messy. So Mum didn't like me messing up the kitchen too badly. But I think watching the way she cooked and my nan and everything, when I moved out into my own home, I love to eat. I'm a greedy little person. And so I wanted to eat nice food, but we had no money. Once you've got a mortgage when you're very young, we're only, 24, if I wanted to eat nice food, I had to work out how to make nice food. And so I learned how to cook things that tasted nice with zero budget, like just a few bits and bobs in the pantry, and have to put them together nicely. And we couldn't afford to eat out. So if we wanted a special meal, I had to be able to cook it because we just couldn't afford it.
And
it just wasn't
was it like
there.
trial and error? You just grabbed what you could.
Absolutely.
I'm going to try this with this. I've got a bit of this. Let's not waste it.
Yeah, some of that, and sometimes I'd eat something nice at someone else's house and I'd ask them how they did it. Back then, this is pre-internet, so you couldn't Google something. So if you ate something nice, you had to either work it out by trial and error, find out the recipe from whoever made it. There were a couple of cooking shows on TV, not a lot, but I watched what I could when I had the time. But it just became a real passion of mine.
So it was an underlying passion that you didn't realise was a passion until you started doing it, and then you became really good at it. Did anyone ever egg you on? Because I know my brother's a great cook, right? Yeah. And we always say to him, you should open up a little cafe or a little restaurant. Was that ever sort of mentioned as you were growing up with your cooking?
Kind of. Not as I was growing up. When I was a grown-up, it was, and I had my little kids, and their happiness with what I cooked made me really happy. But, and I always entertained friends, so I always had people over on the weekend, and I loved to cook for people. And but anytime anyone said, oh, you should do a little catering business or you should do parties or whatever, I'd be like, oh, God, no, it's far too much hard work. I love doing it for joy, but I would never want to do it for work, until, the contestant call came for MasterChef.
Take me back to that moment. Did you apply for it? How does that happen?
Well, I loved...
And were you egged on? Were people going, you should do MasterChef, the show called MasterChef, you should do it, you should do it?
Yeah, it was my best friend that did that, my best friend Tash. So I'd been watching the British one and I'd been telling her all about it. And, oh, my God, and they made this and they did that. You should have seen it. And so when there was a contestant call for Australia, she said, oh, you ought to try out for it. I'm like, yeah, that'd be fun. But I kind of kept putting it off because I was busy. We had our own IT business by that point, Mick and I. And in the end, it was like the day before applications closed, and she said to me, if you don't put in that application, you're never allowed to talk to me about food again. And I'm like, oh, God, fair go.
Mind games. You don't really love cooking.
Yeah. So I did, and, I forgot all about it, and a few months later I got the phone call just saying, we want you to come in and audition. And I did.
Wow. And at this stage, you said you and your partner had an IT company.
Yeah, yep.
And life was good. Life was heading in the right direction. Was this quite beautiful. A scary change to go onto TV and, having to take time out of work, time away from the family? There's a lot of sacrifice there, right?
Well, yeah, but I didn't even know what it was going to involve. So I went and did the audition. Yeah, we were running our own business, 3 little boys, beautiful life, busy life, take them to sport and do their homework with them and working in the business in the daytime. And so going on to, I sort of, in my head, it was a cooking contest. It wasn't a TV show. So that flipped pretty quickly. I didn't know I would have to live out of home to compete until I was days away from moving into this other house. I didn't know I'd have my phone taken away from me. I wouldn't be able to have my computer with me. I wouldn't be able to see my family. I didn't know I'd be restricted to 2 phone calls a week. This is 16 years ago, so I know labour laws are being upheld a bit better these days, and I think contestant welfare is far more important now than it used to be. It wasn't a thing back then. It just wasn't. Now, and I know because I've been back.
Yeah, sure. Yes,
now I know that it's a much higher. Well, it's number one priority, really. So I didn't know any of that when I signed on. And if I had known that, it's good that I didn't know. I wouldn't have applied. I would have said, well, that would have been fun, but I've got 3 little boys. I've got a business. I can't just disappear for what turned out to be 5 months.
That's what they say on SAS Australia as well.
Yep.
If I'd have known what I was doing,
I never would have done it.
Mate, I would have run for the hills. But you take on MasterChef. Not only do you take on MasterChef, Judy, but the nation falls in love with you live. You become this mother to everyone, and then you go and win it. Right? What was that feeling like? Were you ready for the aftermath of being, projected into the limelight?
No one can be ready for that. It was so weird. I mean, if you sort of start with the premise that we'd been locked away for 5 months, over 5 months, not out in public, not really seeing little bits of what was going on in the newspaper and stuff when we managed to have time to look at the newspaper and so forth. But until we got out of that house, and it was 2 weeks between the finale being filmed and it going to air. It's a lot longer now, but back then it was only 2.5 weeks. No, I had no idea what was waiting for me on the outside. I had no idea, and it was quite surreal. And I'll never forget the day when I kind of had a feeling of something really quite big and odd is happening here. Is I was walking down the street and I just heard, "Julie!" And I turned around and it was a road crew. It was these big guys in high vis. And then, my kids were coming home. My oldest son, God love him, was coming home from school, and he had this meticulously kept handwritten list that he showed me, and he said, "These are all the people who want to come over for dinner." And it's like every person who'd made a joke to him. Yeah, there was teachers on the list.
The whole school.
And I'm just like, Joe, I can't have all these people over for dinner. And he's like, oh, but they really want to come. And I'm like, so it was so surreal.
How did you prepare on the move, and how did you manage on the move, or did you manage on the move?
Well,
we like to think we did.
We like to think we do,
Yeah,
but then, you know, that maybe over time I could look back and see that I didn't always make the best decisions. So there was a lot coming at me fast, a lot of opportunities, and like I want to preface this by saying that the things that have come out of MasterChef have been 99.9% amazingly positive and beautiful. And I will never stop being grateful or pinching myself that happened, because it's been wonderful. But there were things that I didn't manage as well as I should have. And one of those was the decision-making around what to take on and what to not take on, because I had fear.
And you're talking of opportunities here, right?
Yeah. And it's like, if I don't take this on board now, I mean, in 12 months' time, this could all be over.
Yeah.
I need to make hay while the sun shines.
Yes.
I need to,
take it whilst you can.
Take it while you can.
Yeah.
And then I can live out my days in some kind of peaceful, bliss and think, gosh, wasn't that an interesting time? Well, 16 years on and it's still going.
Right? I've had that mindset as well, Judy.
So you know exactly what I'm saying.
Exactly, I do.
So I took on way too much. And you can only do everything for so often. And again, in the writing of this book, I look back at my calendar, like my Outlook calendar from that time, and how the days were broken down into these tiny little chunks of all the different deadlines and the recipes and the columns and the appearances and the interviews and the travel and all those things. There was no category for self-care. There was no category for downtime. Family barely featured in that calendar. It was get from here to there, do this, do that.
That family element, all of a sudden, they come, and let's call a spade a spade. They come second best, don't they? It's like it's all of a sudden it's like take it whilst it's there, take it whilst it's there. This is going to benefit the family.
They'll always be there.
Yeah, but
so you take them for granted.
Yeah,
you take them for granted.
That's a tough one, isn't it? And a lot of people don't realise that.
Yeah.
Is that you are actually the sacrifices that you make, right or wrong, in order to have this successful life can be at the detriment sometimes.
Well, and the truth of the matter is that at the end of those days or those weeks when I'd been away, and certainly further down the track when I opened a cooking school and I was on breakfast radio all at the same time, what I had left at the end of the day when I went home to my family was nothing whatsoever. They got the least of me. They got the worst of me. I couldn't smile. I couldn't make a joke. I couldn't provide for them anything that I was supposed to provide because I had nothing left. There was nothing left in my tank at the end of each and every day. So, for me now, I'm back to colour coding my calendar, and I look at it every day and make sure that there's balance and the categories in there. My mental health and my family are the two most important things in that calendar. And if they're not dominating that calendar, then I start dropping things off.
2 words, Revo Fitness. Here's a few more. Simple, 24/7, reformer Pilates, body scanners, massage chairs, squat racks, free weights, pin and plate loaded equipment, no lock-in contracts, no bullshit. All of that and more from just $9.69 a week. That's surprisingly affordable. Join now at Revo Fitness Windsor Gardens or download the Revo Fitness app. RevoFitness.com.au or find the Revo Fitness app in the App Store.
And when did you realise after this MasterChef moment, you've got all these TV shows, you've got a cooking school, when was the moment you realised that you were taking on too much and that, you were close, if not to burnout?
Oh, I hit burnout.
Did you?
I wasn't great at reading the signals that my brain was sending me, that it was all too much. I I eventually went to a GP who, I got a diagnosis of anxiety and depression, went on medication.
Was there
for
a
that.
moment that you came back and you thought, I need help?
Oh, yeah, there was, but
Yeah.
it wasn't me that recognised the moment.
It never is it?
No, it wasn't me that
You're so
recognised the moment.
engulfed in this world that you can't see outside of it, right?
No.
You don't, and it's not until someone.
Well, I guess I found myself back where I was in year 12. And
Talk about doing the full circle. So you've done it in the reverse this time, even though you've done it, in a full time to be where you are today. So you felt yourself going back to what you didn't want to be here?
I had nothing left. I just had nothing left. And I had in my head, because it's sickness, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Severe depression is a serious illness, and it's a life-threatening illness, and my life was threatened by it. And I couldn't stop what I was doing. I couldn't stop because in my head, well, who else can do the Rabbit and Julie Goodwin radio show if I don't turn up every morning? And who else can run Julie's Place Cooking School? I mean, my bloody name was on everything.
No.
What a mistake.
Yeah, no.
And, so I was going home at night. The only way I could shut off my brain late at night was to drink wine. So I was doing too much of that. So I was self-medicating, and that's a terrible, terrible way to sleep because you wake up with your heart hammering, and it just all becomes this massive, self-fulfilling prophecy. And I went right down to the bottom of the well, and I had made a decision that everybody, my colleagues, my children, my husband, my family, everybody would be better off if I just racked off and let them all be. And that was the decision that I made, and that was the action I was taking. And I was stumbled upon by a couple of strangers who recognised that I was a person that needed some company, and they sat with me and
so
talked
you
to
were
me.
actually
I was executing a plan.
Do you mind talking me if it's too hard?
No, it's okay. This is why this is why I wrote the book, and because what I want is for people to recognise the earlier signs before they get to this point.
Yeah.
So when you say, when did you know? I was nearly dead when I found out that I needed help. Yeah. I was sitting on the edge of Brisbane Water, and I was ready. I was just trying to figure out what to do with my shoes. I didn't know what to do with my shoes. And I was trying to figure that out when this young couple came up and recognised how distressed I was and said, "You look like you need some company." And they just sat with me for a couple of hours.
Oh, really? Just passing by? Not, you didn't say hello?
They passed me by and they turned around and came back.
Wow.
And said, "You look like you need some company." And so they just sat with me for a couple of hours and talked to me. They had their dog with them, dogs.
They knew.
They
knew.
They knew.
Yeah, they knew.
They absolutely knew.
They thought if we leave this lady alone, she's not going to be here.
Yep.
And you weren't.
And eventually I said, "I'm going to be all right now. I'm going to call my husband." And when I told him what had happened, he took me straight to the hospital. And then I became a client of the mental health system, and that's what I remained for quite a long time. I was in and out of hospital 5 times.
So you're in the height of your career. You've got everything going on for you. Anyone looking from the outside in would be like, "She's made it. She's this successful," but they can't look at the inside out, can they?
Anyone listening to me on the radio would have had zero idea. Zero. Because that was the strength of some parts of my brain, was to be able to completely compartmentalise, and I've been doing that my whole life, haven't I? And I used to say to my colleague, because we used to say 6 till 9 is the show zone and nothing enters the show zone. Yeah. And so I would say to him, "Oh, I've got some stuff going on, but I'll put it in the box. I'll put it in the brain box." And when we went on the Christmas break in 2019, it all just fell apart.
Pandora's box opened.
When it was time to go back, I was in a mental hospital, and I said to him, "I'm not going to be able to come back," when I thought I was coming back. And he said, "What happened?" And I said, "The box broke." And he knew exactly.
He knew exactly what
had happened. And they held my job for as long as they could, and then they had to give it away. And I also had to acknowledge
Yeah.
that job was part of the downhill spiral, because they're not hours that are conducive to also running a full-time hospitality business, which has you up late at night and working weekends. I was literally working 7 days a week, and I had been doing it for 4 years. Yeah. It is not a sustainable thing to do.
You were burning the candles from both ends.
And sideways.
And sideways. Wow. So how did you manage to recover, and what was the recovery like, and the support that you got?
Recovery's ongoing, because when I first went into hospital, I kind of thought, well, it's like, you break your leg heals and you run away, And so when it didn't work and I had to go back, I was so angry. I remember going in and just being so angry and saying to them, I did all the things you said, and I'm not better. So get me better drugs or get me a better doctor. But essentially, it was like they'd failed. But what I didn't understand was it's not like a broken leg. What it is like is your car. So you can't put petrol in your car and go, okay, job done, I never have to do that again. You've got to keep putting petrol in your car. You've got to keep taking it to the mechanic and keep it running.
Fine-tuning it.
And if you don't, it's going to fall apart. Well, your brain is like a car. And there's a lot of practical stuff that needs to be done, physical stuff. It's a laundry list of things that I absolutely have to do to stay well, and that they involve physical activity, all the stuff we know. Yeah. But once it becomes literally life or death, it gets a lot easier to do, because it's like I will not go back there. You can't be
complacent with it.
I will not go back there. So what I need to do is physical activity. I need to do meditation. I need to see my psychologist. I take medication, and I know not everyone agrees that you should do that, but it has helped me. And while ever I'm in a good place, I'm sticking with what works. Time in nature, time with family, creativity is important to me. So there's a whole bunch of things that I need to do to stay well. And I don't drink anymore. I've stopped alcohol. It's coming up for 4 years now. And
well done.
That was one of the hardest parts of the whole bloody thing.
And probably one of the main contributing denominators to your mental health, because like you said, you even if you have a glass of wine or two at night, you wake up and there's still that tiny bit of brain fog. Your heart's still beating. But
I got to a point where a glass of two never wasn't cutting it.
Exactly.
I had to make a very clear decision, and it's the lifestyle and the habit that's the hardest part to break, actually. But and now it's easier. And I would say to anyone who's questioning whether or not they should maybe ease up a bit on it, well, A, if you're asking yourself that question, the answer is probably yes, and B, it gets easier. It gets easier, and I can make that promise, because I've interacted with now hundreds and hundreds of people who are on that same path. So it does get easier, and now I'm completely happy. I'm so happy that I don't have to have that to worry about, as well as all the other crap.
You said that your memoir helped you as well. Let's finish on your book. How has it helped you, and how is it going to help other people?
Well, it helped me by shining a light on some stuff that, what do they say? Shame dies in daylight. So I brought out all the things that I was ashamed of, and I exposed it all to the daylight. There's really nothing left, and there's nothing left. I've brought it all. I've put it all out there. So judge me if you will, and as you will. It's out. It's there. And it does die in daylight. It lessens, because actually now I've got ownership over all of it. Nobody can expose me for anything. It's mine. And it's there. And what I can say to anybody else who's got shame over anything at all, just work through it, talk through it, get whatever help you need. So the way I want it to help other people is by recognising the early signs of mental decay and that downhill spiral, recognising those signs. If you're a perfectionist, if you're a people pleaser, if you're the person who everyone says, I don't know how you do it, that's not a compliment. It might sound like one, it might be meant as one. That's a warning. That is a warning. If people are looking at you saying, how do you manage? you probably shouldn't be managing all of that. And there's probably stuff going on underneath as to why you think you need to be managing all of that. Please take those signals that your brain sends you before they become life or death. Please get some help, talk. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's keep being open about it and lose the bloody shame of, all the shame I saw in the people who were in the mental hospitals. The 5 hospitalisations I had, there wasn't a single one where there weren't people who were just so ashamed of themselves that they'd landed there. Forget that. You're there trying to get well. You're the hero in this story because you are here trying to get well. Let's make people heroes for acknowledging that they need a hand every now and again. You're the people that are making it easier for me to talk about it. And, I think we need to raise people up, approach other people with compassion and approach ourselves with compassion as well. That's how I hope it'll help.
Shame dies in daylight. And I suppose when you acknowledge your shames and you bring them to the forefront, no one can use them against you either.
That's right.
Because you know that you've already exposed them. And
I've told that story, bro. Go find a different one.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
I love that. Julie, thank you ever so much for coming on my podcast. Great to see you once again. And who knows, you might meet on another show very time soon. You're on SAS Australia.
I'd smash that. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Julie has written an extraordinary memoir. So if you enjoyed this conversation, I urge you to pick up a copy. It's called Your Time Starts Now. I'll link the details in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of Head Game. If you like listening to the podcast, please leave me a review. I'm Matt Middleton. See you in the next episode.
2 words, Revo Fitness. Here's a few more. Simple, 24/7, reformer Pilates, body scanners, massage chairs, squat racks, free weights, pin and plate loaded equipment, no lock-in contracts, no bullshit. All of that and more from just $9.69 a week. That's surprisingly affordable. Join now at Revo Fitness Blair Athol or download the Revo Fitness app. RevoFitness.com.au or find the Revo Fitness app in the App Store.